The next thing we're going to discuss when we talk about functions is domain and range. Not a overcomplicated concept. We've talked about it before, we just haven't gone into great detail. Our domain is really all of our inputs. So all of the x coordinates in any relation that we have is going to be the domain. So if we look here, our relation, we had three different points. We had 0, 1, 2, 6, and 3, 5. Our domain is going to be our x values. So our domain would be 0, 2, and 3. Our range, on the other hand, is just another word for our outputs or for our y coordinates. In this example, we have 1, 6, and 5 are going to be my ranges. 1, 5, and 6. Those are going to be my ranges. Those are my outputs. Those are my y values. And then if we look down here, this statement kind of sums it up. Our domain is going to be the set of all the values of the independent variables. So those independent variables that we just talked about, the ones that we define, which are our x coordinates, we now call those the domain. And then on the other hand, we call our range the dependent variables, which are the y coordinates. So now when we think x, we should think domain. X, input, domain. Y, range, output. All those can be used kind of either way. They can be used together. They all mean the same exact thing. So if we look at our example here, we've got three different sets of points. When I'm talking about domain again, all I'm doing is just pulling out the set of my x values. So 0, 2, and 4 are my domain. For my range, I'm looking at my y values, 1, 3, and 5. So my set of 1, 3, and 5. Is it a function? Remember, we have to go back and ask ourselves, does each input only have one output? Since my domains are not repeated, this is a function. And if I look at my second example, I could look at my domain again, 3, 4, and 3. So really, my domain is just 3 and 4. My range then, or my outputs, would be 6, 2, and 9. So I've got 6, 2, and 9. And now when I ask myself, is this a function? I have to ask myself, does each input have only one output? I can see here I have 3 and 6, 3 and 9. Not a function. Then if we bring this kind of to a more realistic example, if we're talking about the number of shoes, n pairs of shoes can be expressed by shoes equals 2n. So s equals 2n is our shoes example. If we think about our domain, our input for n, we can use any value. If I have one pair, that means I have 2 shoes. So n can really be any number greater than or equal to 0, I guess, because it's possible to have no shoes. But I can't have a negative pair, so it has to be greater than or equal to 0. Now, when I think about my range, my range, which is my output, which in this case is going to be my s's, this is a little bit different because I can't have one shoe. Because if I have one pair, that means I have 2 shoes. So my output is going to have to be my set of even numbers. So my input would be all real numbers that are greater than 0. My output, which is my range, would be all even numbers greater than 0. So domain is the same as my input, which is the same as my x coordinates. Range is the same as my output, which is my y coordinates.